Collins' Good to Great by any chance? Yeah. So Jim Collins, in that book, popularizes the notion that the most important decisions we make in business are not what decisions, but who decisions. Who do I put in charge of sales? Who do I put in charge of closing the books every month? Who do I put in charge of taking care of our customers? Who? Who matters more than any business decision that we make? Because the what of business doesn't happen if you have the wrong who to do it in the first place. Now, in interviewing, right, you've got to control yourself, right? Your reaction is normally you're like, you did what? Right? Part of you is thinking, I can't believe you did that. And the other part of you is thinking, why are you telling me this? Don't you know we're in an interview situation here? But you got to stay calm, so you just have to smile and go, oh, what did he say about you? And on the conversation went. So they will always have something. You just never know if you keep pushing on it how far it's going to go. The final question in the top grading interview is, why did you leave? Why did you leave? And Jack Welch calls this the most important question you can ask in an interview if you read his book, Winning. And we love it too, because it's very transitional. You're hearing about what's going on in their mind. You know, you hear things like, oh, you know, there was a riff. Yeah, you know, a reduction in force. And that's when you want to follow up. You want to get clear. A reduction in force. Okay, like a layoff, you mean? Yeah, like a layoff. Well, how many people were laid off that time frame? I guess there were 2 of us. You want to get real clear, like what's really going on. You want people that are getting pulled out. Former bosses are calling them up, right? They're getting recruited, that's all good. People that are getting pushed a lot, like every job, pushed out, bad, like major red flag. And whenever you hear something that's really vague, you want to get detailed answers. Like you're going to hear stuff like this. I had a philosophical difference with my boss. Right? Hey, yeah, you know, you're laughing because you use that, right? I know. I've tried this too. I've had a philosophical, you feel so good, like I'm educated. I had a philosophical difference with my boss, right? Well, when you hear that, you want to get specific details. And we had this is a real story. We had a guy, try to pull this on us. He said, oh, I had a philosophical difference with my boss. And this guy kind of, pulls himself up when he's telling us this. We're like, oh, this is interesting. He's pulling himself up. There's something here. Let's dig a little bit. Well, what was the philosophical difference all about? He says, yeah, well, I was the VP of sales at the time, and it kind of came down to this board meeting. We're in the board meeting, and the board's giving my CEO a hard time because we had fallen short of our sales numbers, and we're like, well, how bad? What was the damage? He said, we're like 75% of our sales numbers, so it wasn't good. And my boss is kind of squirming and stuff like that. And well, anyway, he kind of broke down finally, and he looked at the board and he said, if we don't get our revenue numbers up, we're going to have to get a new VP of sales. And we're like, oh wow, he said that with you in the room. He's like, oh yeah, he said that with me. We're like, wow, how did you respond to that? And this is when he really pulls himself up. And he goes, you know what? Your mother had a whole lot of foresight when she named you Dick. Now, once again, you got to kind of control yourself, right? Did what? So you kind of play along, right? You egg it on. Wow, you said that. Yeah, he didn't like that very much. He adjourned the meeting at that point. That's when we kind of all filed out. And Dick said, I didn't appreciate that comment back there. Pack your stuff, get on out of here. So now we kind of have him, right? We're like, all right, so you got fired, but this is just too unreal. Like, now we're just curious. We have a little extra time on our hands. Like, well, how did you respond to that, right? You just got fired, so what did you do next? And he says, you know what your problem is? Nobody's ever put you in your place. Ooh, wow, well, how did he respond? He said, who's going to put me in my place? Are you going to put me in my place? What did you do? He said, oh, I hit him! Now we're really curious. Well, like, how'd you hit him? Was it like in the face, like the guy, was it knee thrown? Like, what? Oh yeah, I just let him have it right across the face. We just bang. He's down on the ground. It was awesome, right? And we're thinking, wow, okay. We're smiling. Oh wow, this must be quite a moment for you. Like, so what'd your family think of this? We're just fighting for words. He said, yeah, my wife and I love to call it my $3 million slap. You see, I had options that had fully vested for $3 million that I lost because I was terminated with cause and escorted from the building by security. Wow, philosophical difference with my boss. I struck my boss. So you always want to get detail, right? You just never know. And here's the thing, guys. 1 out of 20 people you interview using this method will forget that they're in an interview. In fact, all of them are going to forget that they're in an interview because it's very conversational in nature. They're telling you their story. But 1 out of 20 is going to tell you something that is absolutely crazy. Everybody's making hiring mistakes. You guys make hiring mistakes. I've made hiring mistakes. The people you report to make hiring mistakes. None of you guys, of course. The present company excluded from that. We all make hiring mistakes. And here's the scary thing. Peter Drucker, remember Peter Drucker, the management guru? He estimated that the average manager makes a hiring mistake 50% of the time. 50% of all hiring decisions are mistakes. And you can think about your own track record to validate, do I believe Peter Drucker or not, but he tends to have been right most of the time. Think about the cost and the energy we put into the hiring process for a second. We have recruiters, we track down people, we go through the interview process, we spend enormous amounts of money and energy for a 50% success rate. You could take out a coin and flip it and get just as good of a result. Take that back to your leadership teams, right? Hey, yeah, I went to this great seminar and I learned if I flip a coin, I'm going to save us a whole lot of money. I do have more to say than that. Because 50% is a starting place. That's where we all are. And the really scary thing is the average hiring mistake costs as much as 15 times a person's base salary. Now, the hard costs are easy to quantify, right? Hard costs. Well, you got to recruit the person. You've got to pay the person once they're on board. There's the administrative overhead cost of carrying that person. And then you realize they're not doing very well, so you've got to have management time kind of built into dealing with that person. Then you have to let that person go, and you've got the associated termination costs. If you're really unlucky, you've got a lawsuit to deal with. Those are just the hard costs. And if you look at different studies, you'll see the hard costs alone will cost you anywhere between 1.5 and 3 times a person's base salary. But what really gets you is when you throw the opportunity cost in there. The big opportunity cost of the embezzler, or the mistakes that people make, or the minor opportunity cost of the business that's not completed on time or on budget. Right? If you did your own cost of mishire study, you will find that your cost is anywhere from 5 times a person's base salary all the way up to 30 times that person's base salary. We actually had a client that became a client because they had hired and fired a fellow about 2 years ago and they were in the investment management business. And this gentleman actually made $80 million worth of investment mistakes. He put the company at risk, made the mistakes before the company caught on, and lost $80 million for the company. I don't know what this guy was paid, but I'm guessing that the cost of that mishire was a whole lot more than 15 times. And if you read the front page of the Wall Street Journal, anytime in the last week, and look at everything that's unraveling on Wall Street, and you think back to how could this have happened? How could we have allowed our financial system to get so ensnared with big bets like this? How could the boards of directors have put the wrong people in place for these institutions that's now crippling our country? It all comes back to the same thing. It all comes back to the who. Who you put in place matters.